A problem-solving conference for business and civic leaders recently took place in Boston, organized by the Alliance for Business Leadership. Among the topics were economic development, inclusion, jobs for veterans, and sustainability. Among those involved was the new executive director of the Hyams Foundation, Jocelyn Sargent. Thank you very much for being with us, Jocelyn.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
First of all, there's so many foundations in the mix, we can get things mixed up here, but talk about the mission of the Hyams Foundation.
Well, the mission of the Hyams Foundation is to support communities to realize economic and racial justice in Boston and Chelsea. We're nearly 100 years old, and we've always focused on local communities and making sure that they're able to do their best and that they're equitable and prosperous communities.
Well, talk about the timing, because we still have a fairly strong economy, at least close to and inside Boston, but we have changes in Washington. There's a climate of polarization that we're all trying to work around. So how does this change things for your job?
I think what it does is it makes our work more primary, more relevant to the community. After the election of President Obama in 2008, I know a number of organizations and communities across the country felt that perhaps we were in a post-racial society. What we at the Hyams Foundation did in that time was rededicated ourselves to racial justice. And what we're finding post-November is that racial justice is more important than ever. And so what it's allowing us to do is to really support those community partners that we've worked with for so long around these issues that didn't go away with the election of President Obama, but have been sort of exacerbated and highlighted and emphasized since November.
Well, I mean, racial justice can mean anything. There's a whole spectrum
Sure.
here. It went in, it could be inclusion among professionals. At the other end, you get people who were, ex-offenders trying to go straight and support themselves and their families. And you've been concerned about that too.
Yes, we've been concerned about inclusion and diversity as well as equitable outcomes. And I think that that's where we miss a lot of the opportunity to do good work to make our communities as prosperous as possible, is we want to make sure that all community members are able to enjoy the benefits of the prosperity that Boston is enjoying right now. I think this is one of the cities that has a reputation. We talked about that at the Boston Business Journal event that Michael Che had mentioned, that this is the most racist city in the country. And what I've found is this city suffers from the problems that other cities in this country face, and that what I love about Boston and being here is we're a community that it really is ready to take that on.
I know there are a lot of people in Boston say the city has improved a lot since the 1970s at least, but on the other hand, I read about some other cities where people of color have better channels of opportunity, like in Atlanta. So how do we get to something more like that?
I think it's going to mean that we engage across all sectors. I really applaud the business sector's efforts in taking on this issue, as well as the mayor's office and some of the educational institutions, as well as the nonprofit sector, for years have been focusing on improving race relations in the city. And so I feel that this is a multi-sector effort, and that we at Hyams are excited about working with our philanthropic partners and as well as our community partners to really make that change happen for Boston. A lot of good things have happened, and we want to make sure that all of our communities prosper and that we have equitable outcomes for everyone.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Jocelyn Sargent of the Hyams Foundation. Jocelyn, another thing that's changed about racial relations in many cities is that there's much more overlap with immigration. This is a global city that we're talking about here, and again, we have changes in policy coming out of Washington now. So what does that mean?
So I was at a event earlier this morning that the Boston Foundation put out, and they were looking at our changing immigrant communities in Boston. And that's a lovely thing about Boston. We have this proud history of being a place where immigrants are welcome. And I think that what we're finding in this new environment and this new climate is the need to really highlight and emphasize those contributions that are made by immigrant communities to the greater prosperity of our city.
What about programs that you support in your funding right now? Anything that you can point to talk about the effect on immigrants, at least?
Sure. We're focusing on making sure that immigrant communities, in particular children, who've had a really hard time with policies that are challenging whether or not their parents will be home when they get there, that are challenging whether or not school is a safe place for them to be. So we've supported several community groups that are doing Know Your Rights work, as well as helping immigrant children and communities find the help that they need to support their stabilization in these communities. We also are working with a number of organizations to try to increase awareness around how equity and justice actually improves the outcomes for all of us.
What would you cite for an example of how that equity and justice can make that kind of a difference?
Well, I think that what we're really learning, I mean, this is one of the things that's so fascinating about Boston, is we have so many opportunities for education, and we find that communities of color and immigrant communities are sending their children to school, and they are here and learning from the fine institutions located here in the community. But when it comes time for them to actually find a place to live and work and the jobs, when they're facing discrimination on those other fronts, then they can't actually give back to the communities that supported them being here. So what we're trying to do is make sure that people understand that, you know, there needs to be a place free from discrimination where the investments that the immigrant communities have put both into the community, as well as the investments that we as a whole, our economic, our educational institutions, have put into the growth of the children who are attending our institutions. This is a place where people feel, especially people of color, feel that they could live their lives and be productive citizens.
Well, of course, education, even in, let's say, in the Boston public schools and charter schools, you have children from immigrant families. They have some extra challenges. Do you do anything to help with that in some way?
Well, we support youth organizing work, so young people really being in the forefront of conditions as they face them in the schools. So we feel that they are the ones that are experiencing the challenges that have to do with them achieving as well as they can. And so we support youth organizing. As a matter of fact, we're partnering with the Aspen Institute later on in May, Opportunity Youth Investment Fund, as well as their collective action initiatives. We will be hosting here in Boston. That'll give us a chance to show off all the fine community work here in Boston, as well as to talk to other leaders in the field.
Talk about the importance for those young people of being able to act on a sense of justice. Maybe go back to when you were growing up in high school or something. Talk about how important that is.
That's a really great question. I feel that young people too often get the message that we don't care what they think. We don't value their ideas and their vision of the future. And so what we're trying to do by investing in youth organizing is to make sure that young people understand that they are the future, but the future starts now. And so that the decisions that are impacting them right now, they certainly can weigh in. Even if they're not voting, they certainly can talk to other people who are eligible to vote about what things should happen in the education sector that would improve their outcomes later on. So we're trying to get that early start so that we will have not only engaged young people, but we have engaged people as they age. We know that voter apathy sometimes can be a problem in communities. And so we want to start that experience early on.
Finally, Jocelyn, you mentioned people want to get some more information about what's going on with the Hyams Foundation. You have a website or something that they can look at?
Yes, it's www.hyamsfoundation.org, and please join us at that website.
Thank you very much for being with us.
All right, thank you.
Jocelyn Sargent from the Hyams Foundation. In a moment, Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We'll talk about some events with the director of the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center.